Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Welcome to the June 28, 2017 meeting of the Local Agency Formation Commission, County of Kern, State of California. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Fowler,
Present.
Commissioner McKibben,
Here.
Commissioner Sanders,
Here.
Commissioner Rivera,
Here.
Commissioner Scribner,
Here.
Commissioner Mello,
Here.
Commissioner McGuire,
Here.
Commissioner Couch, Commissioner Garola.
Okay, thank you. Next will be our Pledge of Allegiance. I'm going to ask Commissioner Mello if she would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. If everyone could please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. Okay, next item on our agenda is item number 3. That's the approval of the minutes. So I'll ask if any commissioners have any questions or changes in the minutes. Otherwise, I'd entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Okay, we have
Second.
a motion and a second. Please cast your votes. And that was Commissioner Sanders and Commissioner Fowler that motioned and seconded.
Motion approved, all ayes.
Okay, next item on our agenda will be public comments. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons desiring to address the commission on any matter not on this agenda and over which the commission has jurisdiction. Do we have any members of the audience who would like to make a public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on then to our item 5. This is notice public hearings. First, we have item A. This is the Kern-Tulare Water District Sphere of Influence Reduction. So I'll ask our executive officer, Mr. Blair Knox, to start us off.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is proceeding number 1706, the Kern-Tulare Water District Sphere of Influence Reduction. If this item seems familiar to you, the commission voted on the detachment portion of this at the last meeting. Usually you handle the detachment and the sphere reduction at the same time, but the applicant had a time-sensitive issue, so we moved forward with the detachment first. The sphere reduction requires a 21-day notice and was not ready in time for that meeting. So today, you are considering the amendment of the sphere of influence of Kern-Tulare Water District to reduce it. The area proposed for reduction of the sphere consists of approximately 182 acres of land. CEQA is met by a notice of exemption prepared and adopted by the Kern-Tulare Water District. And if approved, the proposal is subject to conditions recommended by the executive officer. The district has signed an indemnification agreement. There are no tax increases, no change in zoning. This project is consistent with commission policies. There is no ag land conversion. It conforms to the assessor's parcels. Is consistent with a general plan, regional transportation plan, or a specific plan. And there's no functional overlap. Also has 100% landowner consent. The process required by the Cortese-Knox-Hertzberg Act has been followed, including notices to affected agencies and any notices and publications required by law. Detachment from the district has 100% landowner consent. The district has requested notice, hearing, and protest hearing be waived. It is a recommendation of the executive officer to waive the notice, hearing, and protest hearing and approve this detachment.
Thank you, Mr. Knox. I'll ask if there are any members of the public that would like to make any comment on this item. Okay, seeing none, I'll return to the commission. Any commissioners have questions or comments? May I have a motion to approve then?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, we have a motion.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Please cast your votes.
Motion approved, all ayes.
Thank you. Okay, the next item on our agenda is item B. This is City of Bakersfield Annexation number 654. Mr. Knox, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is proceeding number 1703, the City of Bakersfield for Michelle number 1. For your consideration of the proposed annexation of approximately 7.44 acres into the City of Bakersfield. The proposed area consists of 5 parcels located north side of Taft Highway along the east and west sides of Michelle Street. Notice of exemption has been adopted by the City of Bakersfield. This proposal does not have 100% landowner consent. Notice, hearing, and protest hearing will not be waived. If approved, the proposal is subject to conditions recommended by the executive officer. The city has agreed to an indemnification, I always love that word, indemnification agreement. There's no tax increase. It is consistent with current and surrounding properties as far as zoning. It's consistent with commission policies. There's no ag land conversion. Conforms to assessor's parcels. There is no conflict with the general plan, regional transportation plan, or specific plan. And as far as functional overlap, it does not have a functional overlap, but there is a small overlap with a county CSA, but that CSA is not providing services to those specific parcels, so there does not need to be a detachment. Because this is less than 10 acres, there's an exemption for disadvantaged unincorporated communities, so we don't have to consider that. The city has a valid municipal service review, and they have an adequate supply of water. The process required by the Cortese-Knox-Hertzberg has been followed, including notice to affected agencies and notices and publications required by law. This proposal does not have 100% landowner consent. The applicant has been informed that the notice, hearing, and protest hearing will not be waived per Government Code Section 56663. It is the recommendation of the executive officer to not waive the notice, hearing, and protest hearing and approve this annexation contingent on the outcome of the protest hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Knox. Any questions from the commission before I go to the public? Commissioner Fowler?
I wonder if Mr. Knox would explain what 100% landowner consent means. You talked to me earlier about when someone is non-responsive to the efforts by the city to show interest in annexation. They're considered not to have given consent, but they may be uninterested or for some other reason not want to participate, or could you tell us a little about that?
Yes, that is correct. In order for us to say that there's 100% consent, we need a physical letter of some kind that says we want to be included into that annexation. Saying nothing or opposing doesn't really matter. As long as we have 100% consent, then we can waive the protest hearing. There's actually an item later that I'll talk about. There's annexation coming up where there will not be a protest hearing, no matter if there's 100% or not. There's a special case within state law that allows for that for a certain circumstance. Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Fowler. I'll now open this up to members of the public. Are there any members of the public that would like to make comment on this item? Okay. Seeing none, I'll return to the board.
Motion.
We have a motion from Commissioner Fowler
Second.
and a second from Commissioner Mello. Please cast your votes.
Motion approved, all ayes.
Thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda is public project review. I don't see anything on that item. And commissioner items, do we have any items from any of the commissioners? Okay, seeing none, then we'll move down to general business. This is item 8. First, item A is the approval of claims list number 17-05.
Motion.
Okay, we'll have a motion from Commissioner Mello and a second from Commissioner Rivera. Please cast your votes.
Motion approved, all ayes.
Okay, that brings us to item B, and I know our council has an announcement to make.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman,
Need to punch the mic, please.
Should be on. Try that.
is that better?
Yes.
The applicant is my client, so I'm going to recuse myself from that and leave the room.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll give Mr. Schroeder a few minutes to leave the chamber. Okay, so this item B is the Lost Hills Utility District request for special meeting to hear SOI amendment and out-of-boundary service request. Mr. Knox, please.
Yes. The Lost Hills Utility District and the Wonderful Company have both requested a special meeting of the LAFCo Commission to be held in July for the consideration of a sphere of influence amendment and outside the boundary service request. This request is to provide water to a charter school that is currently under construction and is scheduled to open for the beginning of school year in August. The school site is located adjacent but outside the Lost Hills Utility District boundaries and outside the sphere of influence. The commission has adopted a meeting schedule for 2017 that is dark in July. This item could not be placed on the June agenda due to a 21-day notice requirement for the sphere of influence amendment application. The August meeting would be too late in the month for the school opening, so that does leave us a whole lot of time. The sphere amendment and outside the boundary request can be handled in the same meeting. The district has already applied for annexation of the school property, so we already have that. If we do this boundary service, we know that we're going to move towards annexation in the future. And that annexation application can be processed and heard before the commission at a later date. To hold a special meeting, there are costs involved that were not included in this year's budget. I have asked the applicant if they would be willing to reimburse the commission for any expenses necessary for holding the special meeting, in addition to the typical application fees normally charged. The applicant has graciously agreed. It is not expected the expenses will exceed $2,500. There are two parts to my recommendation. The first, we need to find out whether we're going to have a quorum or not for the July 26th meeting. If we can't have a quorum, we're going to have to come up with a new date, or if we can't do that, we may not be able to have this meeting. So first, Mr. Chairman, if we can find out whether we have a quorum, and then if we do have a quorum, then the recommendation is to hold a special meeting for the Kern LAFCo Commission on the normal fourth Wednesday of the month, which is July 26th, for the commission to hear the Lost Hills Utility District sphere amendment request and services outside the boundary request. In addition, the commission and staff will calculate the cost of the meeting and invoice the applicant for the appropriate amount.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Knox. And so, as he explained, we were going to be dark for the month of July. So does anybody have a conflict that they know of for July 26th? I do not. Okay. Well, looks like you have enough for quorum.
Very good.
Very good. Okay, so what we need then is a vote to set the special meeting. And so can I get a motion, please, to,
Mr. Chairman,
I'm sorry, is there more?
we have a comment from the public.
Okay.
I'll be brief.
Aye.
Melissa Poole, Poole, with the wonderful company. We hate to inconvenience you all in July, but we'd be very appreciative if you'd hold this special meeting and allow this to be heard so that we can ensure the charter school has water and sewer services when we start school in August. So thank you for your consideration of this request.
Thank you, Ms. Poole. Okay, so do we have a motion to set the July 26th special meeting?
Motion.
We have a motion from Commissioner Fowler. Second from Commissioner Mello. Please cast your votes.
Motion passed, all ayes.
Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda, we have the approval of use of digital signature for documents. Mr. Knox, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Several places within the Cortese-Knox-Hertzberg Act and within the Kern LAFCo policies require an original or wet signatures on specific documents. This requirement is outdated and slow. To assist the cities and special districts in reporting and completion of required forms, the approval of a digital signature as defined in Section 16.5A of the California Government Code needs to be established. Code states that each public entity that elects to use a digital signature will have the same force and effect as the use of a manual or wet signature. This will allow Kern LAFCo staff to create, distribute, and collect electronic forms, thus expediting processes and storage of files and documentation. It's my recommendation we approve the use of Government Section Code 16.5 for the use of digital signatures.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Knox. Do we have any questions or comments from any members of the commission on this? Okay, I don't see any members of the public who would like to make comments, so we need a motion to approve the use of the digital signatures for documents.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Please cast your votes.
Motion approved, all ayes.
Thank you. Next item on our agenda is item D, City of Bakersfield County CSA Developer Agreement to provide services outside of boundaries. Mr. Knox?
Mr. Chairman, this is an informational item only. The Government Code Section 56133 requires a city, county, or special district to bring before LAFCo Commission any new services being provided outside of boundaries. There's a couple of exceptions to this rule, including the transfer of non-potable or non-treated water. The county came to me and asked for an application for services outside of boundary for development within the city of Bakersfield that naturally drains to a sump in the county. After reading through the law, I conclude and confirmed with council that this project fits within the non-potable and non-treatable water exemption. So in other words, they don't have to come to the commission for approval. But to ensure that there is a paper record of the agreement, LAFCo, the county engineering, and city of Bakersfield, and the developer have all written letters explaining the details of the agreement and use of the exemption so that when this property with a sump comes to LAFCo for annexation into the city at some future date, there's no question of how and why the services are provided. There's no action required of this commission, as I mentioned before. This is for your information in case you hear of the county providing sumps for the city of Bakersfield. You will know that the county was compensated by a developer for the use of the sump and that it was handled correctly through LAFCo.
All right, very good. Do we have any questions or comments from the commission on this item? Okay, seeing none. Any from the members of the public? Very good. Okay, next item on the agenda, item E, JPA agreements, SB 1266 compliance.
Yes. SB 1266 is a bill passed, signed, and chaptered by a state legislator and governor requiring all joint power agreements to be file these agreements with our local LAFCOs. Your staff has contacted the city, counties, and special districts and informed them of their legal responsibility to provide these to LAFCO. What you have before you in this first batch is that we have received. As you might already suspect, SB 1266 did not give LAFCO any enforcement capability, so we cannot compel these districts or cities or the county to provide these. We just collect them. We will continue to collect them and bring them to the commission as we receive them.
Okay.
And there's no action for you on this one.
Thank you. This is
Actually,
this is a receive and file.
this is a receive and file.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you. So do we have any questions or comments from members of the commission?
The only thing that I pointed out is that dealing with the city of LAFCo RDA no longer exists, and it has to be a successor agency.
Commissioner, we talked about that earlier. I just took what they gave me. I can easily go back to the city of Wasco and request what a JPA for their successor agency.
Thank you.
So I will take care of that.
Thank you, Commissioner McGuire. Any members of the public have any comments on this? Okay, seeing none, I'll return to the commission for a motion to receive and file.
Make that motion.
Okay, Commissioner McGuire,
Second.
and second, Commissioner Mello, please cast your votes.
Motion approved, all ayes.
Okay, the next item is a sad item. This is recognition of the passing of former LAFCo Executive Officer Bill Turpin. Mr. Knox, please.
I'm not going to let Rebecca Moore's last meeting go without making her do a little work, so I'm going to have her take care of this item.
Thank you. Good evening, Ms. Moore.
Good evening, thank you. Most of you, or some of you, knew Bill Turpin. He was the executive officer of your LAFCo for about 20 years, and before that, he was the executive officer in Butte County. He was also the planning director, and before that, he worked for the Department of Justice in their budget department. He was a great executive officer, and he was a really good boss. He was a great mentor. He would give you the 15-minute answer for the 2-minute question. And I'm really glad that he did, because I know that I wouldn't have become the executive officer without his help. He has a wonderful wife, 3 boys, and 2 daughter-in-laws and 3 granddaughters, and I'm going to miss him, and I'm sure those of you that knew him will miss him as well, and we wanted to make sure that you were made aware of his passing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. Any comments from the commission? Okay, well, our condolences to his family and all his friends and everybody whose lives he touched, and he trained you well, and so we appreciate that. The next item on our agenda is item G, and this is recognition of Rebecca Moore on 22 years of service to Kern LAFCo.
Well, let's start by a correction. Ms. Moore was actually here 23 years, which she reminded me of. She was not going to be shorted that last year. Kern LAFCO has been blessed to have quality staff and management over the years. Rebecca Moore qualifies as both. In 1994, Rebecca started as a LAFCO receptionist. At the time, Bill Turpin took her under his wing and taught her how LAFCO works. More important, he taught her why. When Bill retired 9 years ago, many didn't think that Rebecca was the obvious choice. Her depth, knowledge, clear vision, and personality won the commission over. During her tenure as executive officer, Rebecca has steered the commission through some difficult waters, expensive annexations, a misguided lawsuit, and smaller but no less important decisions were all handled with competency, class, and dignity. Several commissioners might remember that the commission was, well, maybe divided isn't the correct word, but there was some tension among the commissioners on certain subjects when Rebecca first took over. The fact that you have to remember what that was like tells you all you need to know about how well she's handled her position. I personally want to thank the commission for allowing Rebecca and I to work together these last 8 months. It had been very difficult for me to step in without her help. Very much appreciated. She's been an invaluable resource to both me and the staff, and more important to me, as I'm sure is to many of you, is allowed me to gain a new friend. Thank you, Rebecca, for your service and your leadership. And we've gotten you a token of our appreciation. We tried to come up with something unique that you would appreciate. We know you aren't big on plaques, so we got a little creative. We hope that you never have to create another paper file for the rest of your life, but if you do, we give you the perfect tool, your very own engraved two-hole punch. She made a joke that she was going to steal one of the two-hole punches as she left. And she doesn't have to steal it because we're going to give it to her. I believe the chairman has.
Would you come on up, Ms. Moore, so I can present this to you? This one looks like it has definitely seen some use. The finish is worn off the handle. Come around. I don't know if any of the other commissioners would like to make any comments to Rebecca as well we present this, but it's been a great privilege for me. I've served on LAFCO, I guess for all 6 or 7 years I've been on the Board of Supervisors, and so we've had a few tough issues, but nothing that you weren't able to navigate, and really appreciated getting to know you, and you did a marvelous job for us, and we really appreciate that you agreed to stay on for 8 months to help Blair in the transition. We've all benefited from it. So. Come on up. She's going to take my chairs.
Nice. I might get used to this.
Well, maybe you'll be back as a public member.
There you go. No, Ginger. I actually was going to get into this big, long thing, but I think if I do, I'll probably cry, and crying on tape is really not good. So I'd like to thank you all for the opportunity to be on LAFCO. This commission is incredible. Any of you have gone to conferences, you've met other commissioners. I know I've met other staff, and I've heard the horror stories, and thankfully I've never, ever had to take part in any of those stories. I've never had any stories to tell. You've handled difficult situations with class. There are times that there's been disagreement, and at the end of the meeting, everybody is shaking hands and getting along, and there are other staff members at other LAFCOs that don't believe me. But I certainly appreciate the opportunity that you've all given me, the time that you've taken to call, to ask questions, and to be patient with me when I had to get back to you with an answer. So thank you very much, and I was actually told by my husband that this is the point where I'm supposed to drop the mic, whatever that means, and this won't, it won't do it. So I'll just say thank you again. I really appreciate you all.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you. This is my very first one.
All right. Well, we certainly wish you the best, and this is bittersweet because we know this is what you wanted to do, but we're going to miss you a lot. Thanks for everything that you've done for us. All right. We're going to move on now to our final item on the agenda, which is item H, Executive Officer Miscellaneous Items. Do you have anything, Mr. Knox?
I do have a few items.
Okay.
I mentioned, Commissioner Fowler mentioned 100% consent on projects. We have a application in for a island, unincorporated island within the city of Bakersfield. Not going to get into too much details because I don't want you to start considering the item before, the whole item's before you. That's not quite legal. But there are certain conditions where you can go through the annexation without 100% consent and waive, and the protest hearing isn't applicable. In this case, so far it looks like the city of Bakersfield has met all those conditions. So this will be the first time LAFCo, Kern LAFCo, has used this process. And this process is, I checked within the law and it says shall, not may, which means you are required to use it. It's not at your discretion whether you could waive the protest hearing or not. The protest hearing has been waived in that situation. So just be aware that that's a new process that we're going to go through on this specific annexation so that you know that that's coming. So if you get any questions from the public or anything like that, you know that's, I can send you the code section of the law that says exactly what that is.
Okay. Commissioner Fowler? Your microphone's off.
I wonder if you could amplify what those conditions are that were met. And I'd sure like something for my file that explains the law.
He can tell you what the conditions are, but he can't get into how the city of Bakersfield has complied.
Yes. Several of the conditions are the change of organization or reorganization is initiated on or after January 1st, 2000. That's one. Change of organization or reorganization is proposed by resolution adopted by the affected city. Subdivision applies to territory that meets all the following requirements. Does not exceed 150 acres and that area constitutes the entire island. The territory constitutes an entire incorporated island located within the city limits of a city or constitutes a reorganization containing a number of individual unincorporated islands. It is surrounded in either of the following ways. Surrounded or substantially surrounded by a city in which annexation is proposed by the city and the county boundaries or the Pacific Ocean, which doesn't apply to us. Surrounded by a city in which the annexation is proposed and adjacent cities. Is substantially developed or developing. The finding required by this paragraph shall be based upon one or more factors, including but not limited to any of the following factors. The availability of public utility services, the presence of public improvements, the presence of physical improvements upon the parcel or parcels within the area. It is not prime agricultural land as defined by section 56064. It will benefit from the change of organization or reorganization or is receiving benefits from the annexing city. The subdivision does not apply to any unincorporated islands within a city that is a gated community where services are currently provided by a community service district. That's it.
Okay. Commissioner Fowler?
One further question. Substantially surrounded. We've had problems in the past understanding how that can be defined. Have you come up with a better explanation? And if so, what is that?
Substantially surrounded is not clearly defined in state law. It gives each LAFCo the discretion to come up with their own definition or make a case-by-case finding. My understanding is that this was brought before the commissioner or maybe even the policy committee previously, and there was no decision made on what's substantially surrounded, so that is still an open question. In this case, of this particular one, it is completely surrounded. So that's not a problem, but that could become an issue as we're looking at other territories within City of Bakersfield or other cities that have islands or close to being islands, that we'll have to come up with a definition, or the commission will have to make a finding individually on each project.
Thank you for that.
Yes.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, and does that conclude your informational items? Does that conclude your informational items, Mr. Knox?
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
End of June is the end of our budget cycle. We've done very well this cycle. We came really close on salaries, but we're able to make it in just under the budget and did perfectly fine on office expenses and those kinds, so we're going to be in good shape. One thing I'm going to be doing here shortly is we will be getting an invoice from CalPERS on our unfunded liability. I'm going to pay that in one lump sum. I believe the commission has approved that in the past, so that's available to do that and stick that into the 2016-2017 budget year. So that's already covered. We already know we have a special meeting coming up on July 26th, 5 o'clock right here. Also, we'll be closing the LAFCo office on Monday, July 3rd. July 4th being the Tuesday, all of us wanted to be somewhere else, and really, we're not going to get a whole lot of phone calls that day, so it made sense to close the office. So I wanted you to be aware of that. It's also Gianna's birthday.
All right.
So we're celebrating that as we're taking the day off as well.
Happy birthday.
And my last is we are having a small reception back in the conference room after this in recognition of Rebecca and her last day. And
Okay,
that's it.
great. Well, let's hurry up and get to it. So I'll entertain a motion then to adjourn to July 26th.
Make that motion.
All right, we are adjourned.